Out of Sheboygan County, Sheboygan police have a message about what it's calling biased policing and keeping people in our community safe. Aisha is back at the First Alert Safety Desk to explain. Good morning.
Good morning, Tammy. Sheboygan police say they understand there's a lot of uncertainty and anxiety about immigration enforcement right now, given the current public discussion about policy changes at the federal level. But after a recent social media post, the department wants you to know it has never been the authority of the Sheboygan police or any other local or state agency to investigate or enforce federal immigration law. Police say the post alleges a Sheboygan police officer asked for proof of citizenship from a teenager. The department has since investigated and says the incident did not happen as was described in the post. So Sheboygan police does say it's unfortunate that people all across the country have chosen to use the uncertainty to amplify fear and mistrust based on inaccurate secondhand information. It says the department does not tolerate biased policing and has taken steps including policy development and regular training on how implicit bias affects all of us, everyone. They say that's to minimize the impact and perceptions of bias on their interactions with the community. The department says its policy is to, quote, provide law enforcement services to the community with due regard for the racial, cultural, or other differences of those served. It's the policy of this department, it says, to provide law enforcement services and to enforce the law equally, fairly, objectively, and without discrimination toward any individual or group. The department says its mission is to uphold ethical, fair, and effective standards for public safety. Tammy.